In this video, we're going to go through one of the tasks that we have set up in our task list. So we've already done the beginner part. In the intermediate, for an extra challenge, I asked you to research a way to kind of do a light switch. I'm going to show you that now. It's going to use some of my preferred ways of doing it, and it might introduce some things that we haven't done before, but I'll be explaining them in more detail in the lecture series. Okay, so we've got our light, which changes through the timeline. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to actually delete all this, and I'm going to make a custom event. Okay, you could do this through a function as well, but I'll do through a custom event, and we'll introduce functions later on. If I right click and type in custom event, and I'll say like switch light. Okay. What I'm going to have is a new node. It's called a flip-flop. And this flip-flop's pretty cool. Basically, it executes either the A pin or the B pin, depending on what has been executed last. So the first time this gets executed, okay, we can execute this multiple times by calling this custom event multiple times. We can go A first, and then the next time it gets executed, it's going to be B, and the next time it's going to be A. So if I get a reference to my point light and type in set intensity, the first time that we switch it, we might want it to go to 0. And I'm just going to hit Control C, Control V, just to copy this. And the next time that we hit this, I'm just going to use the same reference for both. We might want it to go back to 5,000. Okay, so pretty simple. Whenever this custom event is called, and this custom event is going to be called by another blueprint, it's going to do A first, which is going to turn it off, and then it's going to be B afterwards, which is going to turn it back on. Okay, we're just setting the intensity for that. I'm just going to check the defaults on this are 5,000 and white. That's totally fine. So the next thing that we'll do is we're going to make a new blueprint class. Okay, it's going to be an actor class, and this one we're going to call switch. And in this here, basically we're going to have an invisible box. We probably will turn invisible just so we know where we are in the level. And then whenever we walk into that box, it's going to allow us to add input, you know, through the keyboard or mouse or controller, whatever we want to use. By default, these blueprints that we're creating, we can't directly control them through our keyboard or mouse or anything like that. Whenever we press play, and I'm using the keyboard and mouse to walk around and hit other keys and things like that, that information is going directly to my character. Okay, it never kind of goes towards any of the blueprints, but we can manipulate that, you know, through a bit of logic. What we want to have is a box collision, okay, as our let's say a component. Just call it box, it's totally fine. And whenever we select this here, there's going to be details. And if we scroll right down to the bottom, we can create events based off this component. Okay, and remember, events are kind of things that happen in the level that kickstart some of the logic, okay, that you'd find in the event graph. What we want to do is we want to hit the on component begin overlap. You see automatically it just takes me to the event graph and it shows me the node that I've made. We want to create two of these. We want to have on component begin overlap, and we want to have on component end overlap. Okay, so see this here one, event actor begin overlap. It kind of does the same thing as this, but to be honest, I never use it. Okay, I like using these two. I like putting a box component in and using these two. I think they're a lot easier to manipulate. You'll notice that it has this begin overlap has a lot of output nodes. Doesn't have any input because it's an event graph or event node. Event nodes don't have any inputs. So basically, whenever you overlap with this, or whatever overlaps with it, it looks at what components overlap with it. It looks at what other actors overlap with it, And then it does a few other things as well, which we'll not go into. But this other actor is kind of like what we're interested in, okay? So what we could say is there's a few ways that we could do this, okay? One of them is we could use this cast to first person character node, okay? This here one here. Now, this cast to character node is used for different things, but what we can do is we can determine that the player has overlap with this because it's the first person character class that the player inhabits, okay, when they're in the world. When we press play, so whenever we press play, we make an instance of the first person player class and we take control of it, we possess it basically. Any object can overlap with this box, but we want to make sure that whatever object it is, it's only the player, okay, that kind of controls it. And to do that, we just plug the other actor into this object. And again, I'll go over this cast2 node in a later series, but this here basically looks at this first person character class and it checks if this other actor is an instance or an object reference to this class. You know, if it was an enemy that walked over this, this would fail. But if it's us, if it's the first person character that walks over it, this is going to execute, okay? And we're going to do the same for the bottom. We're going to make sure that it's the player that basically leaves the box, okay? You notice if I don't have an object identifier in here, it's going to fail, okay? We do have to have this other actor going in or another pin going in here. That is going to be a first person character instance in the level. So this here is just us basically checking, hey, has the player walked into the box? Hey, has the player walked out of the box? If the player has, what we're going to do is we're going to get the player, get player controller. So we're going to get the player controller. Again, this is something that we're going to carry or go into more detail in a later series, but basically remember I was saying when we press play, our inputs go into the character. Well, in a way it's actually going to a controller class first, and then the controller class manipulates the player, okay? So it's a bit weird. But we're going to get the player controller, and player index 0 just means player 1. Index is always start at 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable input, okay? And when that happens, sometimes it goes into the target, but it shouldn't go. It should go in the player controller, okay? And down here, we're going to disable input. And again, disconnect the target because this should go in the player controller. Because the target is self. So what it's saying is we're going to enable input in self, and self is going to be the switch. So we're going to have input into this blueprint, okay? So when I walk into it, I'm going to have input in this blueprint, which is self, and when I walk out, I'm going to disable input, okay? Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to hit the we're going to right click up here, we're going to make a new input event, and this is going to come from the E key, so I'm going to just search for E. Maybe if I put E input, I'll find it. Yeah, E input. And this is events. You see this events for when the E key is pressed or released. So if I click on this, again, it's an event node. Happens in gameplay. Whenever I hit E now, this is going to fire off. When I let go of E, this is going to fire off. And so what we want to do is we want to make, we're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call it light. And this variable is going to be of the light kind, okay? So remember we made this light class. Whenever you make a light class, you can actually make a variable from it as well, and it's just going to be an object reference. Now this is going to sound a bit weird, but yeah, this is an empty variable at the minute, and what we're going to do is, and if you go back to our previous one where we talk about variables, you'll understand what we're doing here. So we're going to get this light, okay, a reference to this light variable. And what we're going to say is, remember we have a switch light. Whenever we press E, we're going to type in switch light, and I can get that custom event, okay? So whenever I hit that, it's going to look at this light and it's going to call whatever custom event we have in here. Okay. I'm going to have to make this public because we have to, this is an empty variable. Okay, it's a variable of a light type, but it doesn't know what object in the level we're talking about. But if I make this public, again, go back to the previous variable video we have in this, I'll able to select which light we're talking about, okay, which light ref or instance. So if I bring my switch in, and I'm going to just scale it so it is pretty big. And another thing I'm going to do is, see, I will put it just in the middle here. It doesn't have any 3D object either, so you just pretend it does have a 3D object. Or what we could do is, in the switch, we could go to like a box, not a box, we could add a cube. And we could like make this pretty small and pretend this is a light switch. Oh, I'll just turn off my snap to certain size. And I'll put it up against the wall here. Okay. So now you can see there's my light switch. I have to turn around. Okay, my big light switch. So I know where this is. The other way I could do it is I could select the box and I could go down to the rendering section here and I could just make sure that it's not hidden in game, so the box itself would be visible. It's totally up to you what you want to do. When this is in the level as well, again, refer back to our previous variable one, you can see that I can choose what object of light that I want to actually switch on and off when I press this. So I can use the picker and just choose the light. It will only choose objects, okay, which are of a light variable or light class. And there we go. Press play, go over to this, press E, turn off, turn on. Awesome.